Hi everybody, I'm Rebecca Coles and this is Rebecca's Garden on DVD. We've put together some of the best stories that we've had over the years to bring you this collection of getting started in your garden. Hopefully it's going to help you and inspire you and you'll enjoy getting those hands dirty. And if you like this DVD, you'll like the others that we have in the collection as well, including one on roses, flowers, gardening in the summer, gardening in the fall, and look for our holiday edition. Hope you enjoy the show, and until next time, keep those hands dirty.
There's no need to wait for a dozen roses to show up on your doorstep when you can be growing your own. Roses can be grown just about anywhere in the country, and there are hundreds of varieties to choose from. But today, we're going to narrow that down to 3 of the most popular types. Roses are beautiful no matter what size, shape, or color of bloom. The 3 most popular varieties grown in gardens today are hybrid teas, Floribundas, and grandifloras. Now, if you like long stem roses, you'll enjoy growing the hybrid teas. These roses grow on a single stem with one bloom on top. This is called crystalline. They can reach heights of 6 to 8 feet tall, and they do come in a wider range of colors, so you'll have a lot to pick from, and many of them are fragrant. The hybrid teas are a favorite in the gardening world, mainly because of the quality of each bloom. That's why florists all over the world use them in their bouquets. Now, if you'd like to grow a rose bush that has more blooms and maybe bolder color, you may want to check out the Floribunda. Because it grows clusters of flowers, you can see the boldness here. This is called showbiz. These flowers grow on one single stem. The blooms are a little smaller. The plant itself actually stays a little smaller as well. Now, if you like this idea but would prefer something a little larger, then you may want to check out grandifloras. Once again, we get that cluster presentation of the blooms, but notice the bloom on this fame. It's almost twice as large as the Floribunda. And also the plant itself will grow upwards of 6 feet tall, so it's a tall, good-looking plant. All right, so now we've covered the 3 most popular types of roses. What do you say we go get our hands dirty? I'll show you how to plant them. Before you even think about planting roses, the key is to amend the soil with the 3 magic ingredients: peat moss, compost, and cow manure. Also, be sure the site you choose has at least 8 hours of sunshine per day. In the spring, when you buy your roses, you have 2 options. You can buy them bare root or in containers. If you choose to buy them in containers, you'll want to look at the canes and make sure you buy the rose that has the most foliage. The canes that don't have foliage may have just been transplanted into the pot, and that way we'll suffer more shock when we have to once again transplant them into our garden. So this one's a very nice one. Now, the other option is bare root. And it's exactly what it sounds like, bare roots on a cane. The thing that's very important with the bare root plants is that they must remain moist at all times. If the roots dry out, the plant dies. So when you get them home, sink them in a bucket of water, add some fish emulsion for an extra kick, and the rose bush will do just fine. And keep in mind, you can save up to 40% if you buy bare root roses, so it's a great deal. Now, when you get them home to plant them, it's important to trim off any of the old roots, like the brown mushy ones here. And you'll want to look at the canes. If they touch or cross over each other, go ahead and remove those as well. Okay, now we're ready to plant. Now, whether you're planting a containerized rose or a bare root rose, there's one thing that's very important for both, and that is locating the bud union, because that's going to determine how deep the rose will be planted. Now, the bud union is this area here. If you live in the southern climates, it's very important that the bud union remains level with the soil surface. If you live in the northern climates where you get the cold winters, you'll want to make sure the bud union is at least 3 inches below the soil surface. Now, the technique for planting bare root roses is a little different than the containerized roses, so let me show you how to do that today. First, you'll need to measure the depth of your hole. You can do this by laying a shovel across the diameter. This will help you figure out how far the bud union is from the soil surface. In my case, it needs to be 3 inches below, since I live in the north. The next step is to create a mound of soil in the bottom of the hole. Then here comes the fun part. Save all those old banana peels and lay them around the mound of the soil. This will add potassium, which will give your roses an extra boost to get growing. Then spread the roots apart and place them evenly over the mound. This technique keeps the roots from clumping and will force them to spread. And finally, go ahead and cover up everything with your well-amended soil. Now, it's important to keep your rose bush watered, and you may want to give it a jump start by feeding it a plant starter. Or if you use fish emulsion with your bare root rose, just go ahead and pour that on. Now, if you sit back, take care of your rose, it won't be long before everything's coming up roses. Everyone loves roses, but not everyone loves growing them. I mean, let's face it, roses get a bad reputation for being hard to grow. It's not so much that they're hard to grow, it's just that they need a lot of attention. I mean, you can't just plant the rose and expect that it's going to produce beautiful blooms like this while you sit back. It's important that you make it a habit to care for them in order for them to look beautiful and healthy all summer long. The first tip is to start out with a rose that is known to grow well in your climate. You can check with a garden center or your local county extension, they'll recommend one. The next thing is the site you choose. Roses need at least 5 hours of sunshine a day, and soil is very important. They don't like wet feet. In fact, the soil should be well drained and very fertile. The next thing, when time for planting, make sure you give the roses room to breathe. They need that air circulation. This will help reduce the chances of an outbreak of fungus or bacteria. Roses are kind of like kids. They like to be fed and they like variety, like fish meal, blood meal, alfalfa meal. I've mixed those together and I'm going to sprinkle that around the base of the plant. Let me show you how. For mature roses, take 1 cup of fertilizer and apply it around the base of the plant. Newly planted roses only need about 1/4 cup. Then work the fertilizer into the soil with a hoe. Now it's best to apply your granular fertilizer 2 times a year. Once early spring and then mid-summer. Now in between you'll have to supplement feeding the roses with a water-soluble fertilizer every 2 weeks. It's also a good idea to mulch around your roses. I like using cocoa bean mulch. It helps keep the pests away and keeps the beds weed-free. Apply about 1 inch or less around the base of the plant. And keep in mind, too much mulch will reduce oxygen to the root system. Now, if you want blooming roses all summer long, you'll have to invest in a good pair of pruners and also some gloves. It's very important that as the roses begin to fade, that you remove the bloom. You can do that by cutting them off. However, it's more than just cutting at the stem. You've got to look at the leaves and go down the stem until you find a cluster of 5 leaflets. Then you'll cut the stem just above that. Now notice how I cut the stem at a 45-degree angle. This will prevent water from sitting on top of the stem. Now the reason we cut it in this location, this is going to send out a new shoot, we'll get a new bloom. But keep in mind, the next shoot is going to grow a little tall. So if you don't want your roses above your head, feel free to move down on the stem. Just make sure you look for the 5 clusters of leaflets. A pruning sealer is also a good investment. Apply a dab of it to each cut. This will seal the cane, preventing insect damage as well as other diseases. And speaking of diseases, black spot is the most common rose disease. If you want to grow roses, you better be ready to do battle with black spot. Now, there are many chemicals out there that do a fine job in controlling black spot. Just be sure to read the directions carefully. I prefer to use organic methods, and there's now products out on the market that contain neem oil, which has been proven effective to control black spot and other diseases as well. Another common problem with roses is powdery mildew. It starts as small white fuzzy patches and can spread to the entire leaf surface, turning the leaves yellow and weakening the plant. To prevent this fungus, mix 1 tablespoon of baking soda and 2½ teaspoons of vegetable oil into a gallon of water. Then spray the plant above and below the leaves every couple of weeks. Now remember, no matter what product you choose, a regular routine of spraying your roses is the key to preventing any disease. And finally, don't forget to water your roses. They'll appreciate about 2 inches of water a week, and just be sure to water them at the base of the plant. Well, hopefully these tips will help you grow beautiful, healthy blooms so that you'll come out smelling like a rose. Growing roses for most people is a hobby, but for some it's more than that. It's a competitive thing. Many rosarians from around the country will actually spend their weekends showing their roses at conventions. I had a chance to go to one of these conventions, and you're not going to believe the number of people who are actually addicted to these flowers. Gertrude Stein once wrote, "A rose is a rose is a rose is a rose." But to these exhibitors at the American Rose Society's National Convention, a rose is a meticulously groomed flower ready to face the competition no matter what it takes.
If they're a little bit too tight or too closed up, we try and get them more open.
And just how do these rose lovers get their prized possessions to open up? Well, there's the ever-popular cotton swab method.
You put it in there and use it as a wedge at the bottom to move the petal out.
And of course, everyone seems to have their favorite technique.
And then you want the petals to come out like this.
It's more like rolling a piece of paper. Eventually, it stays.
Sometimes you'll see foliage like this that wants to just stick straight up.
And it's not just the blooms that need attention at this type of show, it's the leaves too.
I'll put paper clips on the end to hold the foliage down. It doesn't take very long, just about a minute or two, and the foliage will stay down. That way it gives the rose good balance and proportion.
These contestants really do take their craft seriously. At times, they look like surgeons with all the right tools for producing the best rose in their category.
We like Floribundas and Grandiflora sprays. We have 861 rose bushes.
Jerry and Paul Garino from Chicago, Illinois, have been showing their roses for the past 24 years. They've won boxes of ribbons, and they say the secret to their success is teamwork.
He does the wedging, he makes sure the leaves are polished. I look at the heads and make sure they're right. And
I make sure they're straight. I make sure that when the groups are put together, there's a good presentation.
Right.
John Mattia flew in from Orange, Connecticut, traveling 2,000 miles with his roses.
My specialty is the hybrid tea, and I'll be entering these both for the single highest prize, which is the queen of the show, and for the major trophy in this rose show, which is the Nickerson Bowl.
At the last two national rose shows, John had 8 of the top 12 roses, so he definitely knows what the judges are looking for.
That's basically a rose that has a very high center, such as this rose has, with all the petals concentrically arranged around it, and eventually coming down to a triangular shape. This rose needs a little more work on it to eventually have a shape that looks something like a triangle, as you see my fingers outlining it.
Exhibitors, it is now 9:15. You have 15 minutes.
After 4 hours of prepping, the roses are brought across the hall to the ballroom, and it's showtime. There are over 6,000 roses in this room, representing every variety imaginable. Now the judges have to decide which ones are the best in each category. Jim Beardsley is the chairman of the judges.
We have 3 judges on a team for horticulture and then 2 clerks. The judges obviously do the judging, and the clerks assign the ribbons and record the names of the winners. If you look at the rose from the side, they're looking for a nice triangle shape so that you have a nice high center and the guard petals are horizontal. When you look down on the rose, they want a nice symmetry of the flower so that it's open and uniform.
Once the individual categories have been judged, the first place hybrid teas and grandifloras are brought into another room to be judged. Here they will pick the queen and king of the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the queen of the show. It's Elina, exhibited by John Mattia of Orange, Connecticut.
And what about the king?
The king of the show is Andrea Stelzer, also by John Mattia of Orange, Connecticut.
So for John Mattia, traveling 2,000 miles from Connecticut really paid off.
I'm very elated in what I see up here. It's fantastic.
And remember the Garinos? Well, they won several first and second place ribbons in the spray rose categories.
You're really here for the fun of it, but then when you find out you won something,
Then you're happy.
Yeah, then it's nice too.
If you're a garden enthusiast, no doubt you've heard of Longview Gardens, located here in the deep south of New Orleans. The beautiful grounds here are maintained by a staff directed by John Harris, the head gardener. Now today, John is pruning roses. Now while most of us would throw the trimmings away, John has a great technique for propagating roses with the trimmings.
So John, I'm excited to learn about this technique for propagating or cloning plants. How did this come about?
Well, propagation is probably one of the most fun things you can do in gardening. It's recreating plants from pieces and parts of other plants. And I was having difficulty out here propagating them until this little lady came out here and showed me how to construct a rooting box that you see over here on the table.
Now, what makes this technique different from what we're used to?
I feel it's the different layering of the materials that we use that help establish a root system.
And it really works.
It really works.
Now, you used a fish aquarium here. Do we need an aquarium?
You can use any kind of open container. I happen to find that discarded on the side of the road. It was cracked, and so it's a perfect rooting box. Gets the light in there.
Great way to recycle.
Absolutely.
Some of those. Yeah. Okay, so how do we get started, John?
First, have a container. The most important thing here is make sure it's good drainage in the container.
So if you use the aquarium, a couple of cracks are a must.
Oh, a must.
Okay.
Then we have a bottom layer of sand. Then we have a middle layer of perlite. And then we have a top layer of just a good lightweight loose garden soil will do.
And all these products can be picked up at the garden center.
Easily. Now the first step is a good layer of sand in the bottom of your container, and the purpose of this sand is to provide something nice and firm for the cutting. Cutting likes to feel something on their feet. It's kind of is how I was explained. So I put about a 1 to 2 inch layer of sand on the bottom.
Okay.
And then the next layer is made up of perlite, which is a mineral as a result of volcanic activity. And what it provides for this rooting box is a layer of where air can penetrate down. Air is very important for developing root systems, any root system. And this, again, provides good drainage and, again, pore spaces so air can penetrate.
Now, what's the layer there? How many
It's about
inches?
another 1.5 inch layer of perlite.
Okay.
And then to finish it off, the top layer is made up, again, of a good lightweight garden soil mix.
So it doesn't have to be a soilless mixture?
It doesn't have to be. Those work fine, though. Those work fine.
Either
and again, this provides a base, a layer where there are nutrients in here and helps retain some moisture.
And again, 1 to 2 inch layer?
1 to 2 inch layer. With your container already, now it's a time to prepare our cutting. And what you look for in a rose cutting is, first, the stem should be about the size of a pencil. It should not be old wood. It shouldn't be the real new wood. It should be that in-between wood. You can feel the difference. Look for a piece that has some remnants of old flowers on it. And this will ensure that you'll get a cutting that will flower for you. Very important, but it's also very important for the rooting process is to remove the old flowers because they will sap away strength from the cutting process, which, again, you want this thing to make roots and grow for you.
Okay, so we've got the tops cut off. Now, do we have to prepare the bottom?
Oh, yes. And the way we prepare the bottom is we look for a leaf node. This is where the roots originate from. And the final leaf node is you find where a leaf is attached, and right there is a node. And you do a cut about a 45-degree angle, about a 1/4 inch below.
Below. Okay.
Now, with that cut made below the node, it's time to remove these lower leaves because these would just be a source of disease since they're going to be in the soil. And now the moment we've been waiting for, plunge it into your cutting bed till you feel the sand, its feet hitting something, it's happy. And by putting this in a shady spot, keep it moist, 5 to 6 weeks, you should have some nice roots formed in that cutting. And hopefully you get a root system. There it is. Oh, now that's great. Nice, long, white root hairs. Now, this is still too young to go outside into the landscape. It's too tender, so we need to place it into a larger container. And I would grow it in here till I see roots coming out the base, and then it would tell me that it's time to go into the landscape.
Wow. So the whole process really only takes about 6 months.
That's it.
And really, that's no investment at all when you consider that we'll be enjoying these beautiful roses for years and years to come. Would you like to grow roses the easy way? Believe it or not, there is an easy way, especially if you consider growing hardy shrub roses. In the last 15 years, they've gained enormous popularity, especially in the northern climates, because of their winter hardiness. No more tipping, covering, or wrapping. They're low maintenance, and the best part, you get blooms like this year after year. Hardy shrub roses are bushy in appearance, so they're great for landscaping. Whether it's for creating a hedge or by a fence, these disease-resistant roses can be used as you would any shrub or perennial. There are 3 types of hardy shrub rose bloom cycles: non-recurrent, which put out one magnificent display in June; recurrent, which produce lots of blooms in the spring and again in the fall, plus a few during the summer; and ever-blooming, which usually bloom all season long.
As you begin your rose research, you're going to find out that there are hundreds and hundreds of different varieties and hybrids of hardy shrub roses. So the best place to start is at the garden center. They can tell you specifically which plant will do well in your location. Now, some of the most commonly asked questions include how tall will the rose get, and of course, will it grow well in my neighborhood? Well, here's what you need to know. First of all, there are basically 3 different heights of roses. You've got your climbers, your shrub roses, and then the ground cover. Check the tag because this will tell you specifically how tall the rose will get, and it will tell you what zone the rose will grow best in. Typically, hardy shrub roses grow best in zones 4 through 6. Now, if you're a first-time rose grower, you may want to consider this hardy shrub. It's called rugosa. This will survive some of the coldest climates in America. You can see we get beautiful blooms that are loaded with fragrance, not to mention these beautiful rose hips, which are fantastic in the fall and winter garden. Now, this plant is tolerant to salt, which makes it a great addition to seaside gardens. It's best to plant hardy shrub roses in early spring, but you really can plant them anytime as long as you can dig in the soil. Now, there are 2 options: bare root, which are usually available early spring or fall, and container plants, which are readily available anytime. Now, the best location for your rose is going to be an area that gets at least 5 hours of sunlight a day. It's best to keep them away from trees, otherwise the roots compete. And also make sure the soil is well drained. Roses do not like sitting in water. Now, when you dig your hole, you want it to be as deep as the container and a little wider. Before we put the plant in, we are going to add some bone meal. This will give us some phosphorus and potassium. Then, very carefully, remove the bush from the container and place it in the hole. Now, before you cover it up, make sure you amend your soil with a little compost, manure, and peat moss, and your rose is going to do just fine. As you fill in the hole with soil, try to create a saucer-like dish under the rose bush. This will help direct the water to the root system. Now, you should be watering about 1 inch a week the first year. After that, the roots will be well established and should be drought resistant. Just make sure you add a layer of mulch to retain moisture, and that helps eliminate weeds as well. And don't forget the fertilizer. A 10-10-10 should be used 3 times a year during the blooming season. Now, if you decide to plant a bare root hardy shrub rose, the one thing you've got to remember is that you cannot let the roots dry out. You want to keep them moist until you get the plant home, and then sink them into a bucket of water for about 3 to 4 hours. I've added a little fish emulsion just to give them a boost. Now, before we plant the bare root shrub, it's important to prune back the roots. This will help the plant get established. When you set the bare root in the hole, it's important that the crown here is level with the soil surface. Other than that, everything else is the same: the watering, the mulching, and the fertilizing. Now, keep in mind that when it comes to the canes of hardy shrub roses, there are 3 classifications. First, cane hardy. That means that the canes above the snow line will survive the cold weather and provide winter interest. Snowline hardy implies that only the canes protected by the snow will survive. And then root hardy. The whole cane may die back on this shrub, but it will regrow in the spring like any other perennial. And finally, the one nice thing about hardy shrub roses is they're not real picky about being pruned. All you need to do in the spring is shape up the bush, take out the dead canes, and really that's it. And I guess I should warn you, once you plant one of these, you'll see how easy they are to care for, and you'll probably want to add to your collection. Just outside the heart of New Orleans, you'll find beautiful Longview Gardens. This incredible property is known for its well-manicured landscape. The courtyard is one of the main attractions, filled with hedges upon hedges of blooming white roses. They're at their peak in the spring and the fall, but getting them to look this good requires a lot of work. I had a chance to visit with the head gardener, Ann Donnelly, late in January, the time of the year when the big pruning job begins. So you have 500 roses to maintain here. I bet that keeps you busy.
Yeah, it sure does, Rebecca.
And I'm looking at all these thinking, okay, I got some pruners here. I'm going to be here a long time pruning these roses.
Right.
But you don't use the little pruners.
Well, we have a shortcut method with our electric hedge clippers. These are Floribunda roses. This is actually a summer snow rose, introduced in 1931, and it's one of the signature roses here at Longview. And so we actually prune twice a year. We prune hard in January to about knee height, and then in August we prune to thigh high.
And this is very different than what most people around the country.
Exactly.
I have to dig my roses out of the snow with an ice pick. We prune ours typically once, so you do it twice.
Right.
Here it's January, it's a little cold. You actually had beautiful roses in bloom here.
Typically we'll come in here January, they might be full of blooms, and it's a little bit disheartening to go ahead and cut them off, but we've got to do it, sort of force the bush into dormancy.
Okay, so I'll put these away, and then we'll get out the big tool.
Determining what height to prune the rose bushes is the first step. Anne usually prunes these floribundas about 2 feet high.
Now, Anne, I got to tell you, this looks so severe. I mean, you're taking off a lot of the bush here.
Well, people are really intimidated by rose pruning, but actually what I'm doing is just getting my height down. Then I'm going to come back with my hand pruners and clean up the cuts, clean out the dead wood, the cross branches, things like that. And it does encourage your bush to bush back out, and you have a healthy new shrub growing.
And we should mention, you don't do this on all rose bushes.
No, we want to do this just on the bush roses, the floribundas, polyanthus, any kind of bush rose.
Okay.
With hybrid teas, you go back and do it by hand.
Okay, well, let me give this a try. This looks too fun. Okay? I hope you don't have to replace these when I'm done.
Anne says that one of the keys to this power pruning method is making sure that the blades of your hedge trimmers are very sharp. And even then, hand pruners are needed for some touch-up work.
So part of the problem with the hedge trimmers is you want to make sure that your cuts are clean. These look pretty good, but they're torn ones all over the place. And what you do is come back and cut to an outward-facing bud.
Okay.
So here's an example of a dead stem that you can actually cut all the way down to the base.
All right, I'll take care of that one.
Alrighty.
Okay, got that one.
Perfect. Then we want to look for crossing branches, something like this, where the two branches are going to rub together, open up the bark, and provide an entryway for disease and pests to get in.
Okay, so you want to get rid of that at the base?
Exactly.
Okay, now once you get this all cleaned up, what's the next step?
Well, then we come back with our fertilizer, and then in about 6 weeks we can expect the first blooms to start appearing.
6 weeks,
Yeah.
How great. And then you prune again?
We prune,
in
we just go
August.
around a dead head all summer long, and then in August we start all over again.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people are intimidated by roses. You do a lot of work here, but this seems very simple, very basic.
These kind of shrub roses, the floribundas, the polyanthus, are really a good rose for a beginner. You really just can't make too many mistakes with them.
Oh, we like those kinds.
We sure do.
Just outside Portland, Oregon is Willamette Valley, home to Heirloom Old Garden Roses, a nursery that houses one of the country's largest collections of climbing and rambling roses. You can practically smell the flowers a mile away. Isn't this beautiful? How many of us wouldn't want an archway spilling over with roses like this? These are climbing roses, and I think you'd be surprised just how easy they are to grow. The nursery grew out of love between Louise and John Clements and their love for roses. The 2,000 roses of all kinds are a stunning sight for those who visit here, but it's the climbing and rambling roses that stop them cold.
Now this is a beauty. This is a rambling rose. Let's start off with this. What is exactly a rambling rose?
A rambling rose is one that will bloom in the spring for about 4 to 6 weeks, produces enormous number of blossoms, needs to be trained up over something. You can train them into a tree over an ugly outbuilding. Actually, it can even be trained over an ugly factory because there are some that get to be 50 feet tall.
And it has very flexible canes.
Yes, it does. And that's the difference between this and a climber, because these flexible canes allow it to be trained up over things and be tied to a pergola.
Here we have a beautiful specimen of a climbing rose, but what's the difference between that and a rambling?
It repeat blooms. It's going to bloom clear through the season.
That's important to know.
Yes, and it also has heavier canes and needs to be tied to a structure. Otherwise you're going to have long canes that will flop out of place.
Okay, so a little more work then that way, and it doesn't grow as quickly.
It's not as vigorous. Generally, they're 10 to 12 feet tall, and they do need to be deadheaded.
Okay.
To encourage bloom.
But you know what? Take a look at this. This is what you call Eden?
It's Eden, yes.
Zones 5 through 9. Yes. This is a keeper. I'm telling you, it's beautiful.
Gorgeous.
The climbers are an excellent choice for the backyard garden since they offer color all season long and they don't need a lot of space. Some of Louise's favorite climbers are Lavender Lassie, Breath of Life, Dortmund, and Gold Badge. So what's the secret for Louise's success?
Here, she starts by digging a hole 2 feet deep, whether it's for a small rose or a large rose. And this technique seems to really work for you.
Absolutely. You wouldn't build a small home for your family, given a choice. We don't want to build a small hole for our roses. We want to give them plenty of luxurious room to grow. We put 6 inches of manure in the bottom of the hole.
Okay, so I'll start with that.
Okay.
Now, what's next?
We're going to fill the hole.
You can use a mixture of half peat moss or mulch and half potting soil mix. Add enough so that the soil surface of your rose will be about 2 to 3 inches above ground level. Then you're ready to position the rose plant close to your trellis and backfill. The best time to plant any kind of rose is in the spring or in the fall, at least 6 weeks before your first hard frost. And as for fertilizing,
we fertilize twice a year, April and then again in July. And you never fertilize after about 90 days before your first frost.
You don't want to promote a lot of growth.
That's right, because it would go dormant, and when it goes dormant, it would have too much new growth.
And once your climbers are established, they'll need room to roam. Where they go is up to you because you need to train them. And keep in mind, training is the key to bountiful blooms.
Obviously, we all grow roses for the blooms, and you have a great technique that's going to ensure lots of blooms. What is it?
Well, yes, I have already attached it to the trellis with a short piece of stretchy tie tape, and we're just going to take this and bend it down, and if you'll tie it there at the other end, what we'll get are what are called lateral breaks, or growth right where the leaf joins the cane, and that will bloom and will fill up this area, and then as it goes further along here, you just tie it up and then tie it up here, and
so
we just fill the area.
Keep getting loaded with blooms.
That's right.
So in no time, this is going to be covered with fragrant, beautiful
fragrant blooms.
I can't wait.
Roses, the national flower, lovely to look at and sometimes a pain to maintain. But thanks to modern science, researchers have developed easy care roses that turn minimal work into maximum rewards. Some of the easiest to grow include shrub, carefree, and climber roses. No one knows this trio better than Penny Nichols Larkin, who has spent the last 18 years planting, pruning, and pondering over her menagerie of roses. Her membership in the Rose Society has blossomed, turning her into an expert and a mentor for budding beginners.
If somebody wants to start with roses, with your experience and your knowledge, what should they start with?
Well, I think starting out with shrub roses rather than hybrid teas is the real key to success. And start out with plants that are really hardy to your area rather than trying to grow something that you see in a catalog but you don't know if it's going to grow in your area.
As the name implies, a hardy shrub rose is one that survives winter without any special care and without sacrificing quality blooms and overall appearance. All have bushy, shrub-like forms and are typically resistant to insects and diseases. Shrub roses are perfect for the beginners interested in roses. Penny, who inherited her love of gardening from her father and grandmother, has kept her genetically imposed green thumb busy with a collection of 130 different varieties of shrub roses.
Tell me your favorite.
Well, I really like Hope for Humanity. It was developed in L'Assomption, Canada for a commemoration of the Canadian Red Cross 100th anniversary.
It's beautiful.
It's a shrub rose that presents itself in clusters of 5, 7, 12 blooms on a stem, so one stem is a bouquet.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes.
And it blooms from spring to fall?
Absolutely, spring to fall. It'll be the first thing to bloom in the garden and the last thing to quit.
That is the rose for me.
Another easy care rose with a bushy habit is the Carefree variety. The Carefree rose mixes well with other shrubs and most have long blooming periods.
This is Carefree Delight, Rebecca, and this is a Dr. Griffith buck rose. It presents itself with 5 petals and has a beautiful yellow stamen and a white eye. This rose is in constant bloom, and so you can grow it like I have here in a bucket, or you can grow it as a landscape plant. It'll sprawl. It has a mounding habit, so it's a delightful little rose.
And for those who want a profusion of blooms, check out the Carefree Beauty, which flowers from May to October. The final easy care rose in our trilogy, and a must in any rose garden, is the Climber. These roses grow longer stems that sprawl or can be tied to vertical structures to create a wall of living blooms. Another climber that will add new heights to your garden is the William Baffin. It's very hardy and blooms all summer long. There's really no trick to planting roses, and we wanted to prove that to you in this segment. So we're going to plant a rose, and we wanted to give Penny a rose that she didn't already have. So we had to search. We found this Rambling Red, which we know you don't have because it's brand new to the market. And you've selected to put it here. Why is that?
Well, roses need 4 hours of sunlight to survive, 6 to 8 to thrive. And so this is a good location for this plant.
Good. And we've already dug out the hole. It's, what, 18 inches deep?
18 inches deep, 24 inches wide.
Which is roughly about 3 times as big as the root ball.
That's right.
Okay, we've taken the soil out of the hole. We put it in this wheelbarrow. On top of that, we've added some compost and some manure, and we're just going to mix this together. Next, remove the root ball from the container. If the roots are root bound, be sure to score the bottom to loosen. Now place the plant in the center of the hole, making sure the crown, or what's known as the bud union, is level or slightly below the soil surface. In colder climates, you'll want that bud union 2 inches below the soil surface. Now just backfill with the amended soil and add mulch. Once the roses mature and get to this size, then what kind of care do they need?
Well, they're certainly going to need pruning.
Okay.
Especially when the rose has just finished its cycle of bloom. So you're going to prune back to a 5-leaf union.
Okay, so something like that. Now, do you do this? That's a lot of pruning. This bush has a million roses on it.
Actually, to a bush this size, I would probably do a whole lot more hacking off than actually.
Okay, so you're not going to kill it. Okay, fertilizing?
Fertilizing, you're going to use any kind of a 10-10-10 or a rose food that you scratch into the surface.
Once a month?
Once a month, and then you might use a foliar feed after that on a every 10-day basis.
All right, and let's get serious. Let's talk about black spot. That's going to be a problem, so what do we need to do for that?
Well, there are all kinds of different chemicals that you can use, fungicides, and I like to rotate my chemicals so that I'm not getting a buildup of the same chemical.
And for those that like organic sprays, the neem oil has been proven quite successful. You just have to put it on every 14 days.
Right.
Well, now that you know just how easy it is to grow roses, don't get stuck. Just check out my website at Rebecca'sGarden.com and we'll help take the worry out of roses. With Valentine's Day just around the corner, millions of roses will be sent to sweethearts around the country. It makes you wonder how a florist could possibly find the time to get all these flowers ready for that one special day. Well, I went behind the scenes to a rose grower in Massachusetts to find out.
Valentine's Day is the busiest day for us. And the thing about Valentine's Day is everybody wants their flowers on the 14th. They don't want them on the 15th and they don't want them on the 13th. A lot of effort goes into getting them there on the 14th.
For head grower Tim Began, that means producing over 100,000 roses to be in perfect bloom on the big day. But roses in New England in February? We all know roses need high temperatures and plenty of sunlight to survive. So to create the right climate, the greenhouses are heated by 3 massive steam boilers, and the natural light is supplemented by 1,000 high-pressure sodium lamps.
So between the heat and the lights, we can really fool the roses and bring them in on time.
Tim makes sure the plants are well-fed and pest-free, but one of the more unlikely secrets to mass-producing these perfect roses may be Tim's special ingredient for enriching the soil.
But the latest thing we started to do, as opposed to the old way of using manure in amending the soil, we're using coconut. They come in bricks from Sri Lanka like this. We have to dissolve them in water. And believe it or not, this compressed brick breaks up into real fine fiber, and the rose roots love it because they can penetrate through it very easily.
And of course, it's not all magic coconuts. Choosing what to plant is key.
We're looking for roses that produce long stem roses in a fairly rapid time, and that have very good keeping quality in the refrigerator, and also hopefully to have some fragrance.
And that's why they chose 2 of their most popular varieties. The old favorite, Forever Yours, is a deeper, darker red, while Cardinal is more vibrant. And with the Cardinal, Tim uses an innovative growing technique he calls bending.
The proper way is to take the head, pop the head off,
you take it and try to bend it and make a crease just above the feather leaf, and then take your whole stem and push it down as far as you can get.
The bending encourages new growth. Each bent stem produces 2 to 3 new shoots, and by February 6th, all the roses are ready for cutting. And then the rush is on. Everyone at Johnson's works around the clock to get the roses out for Valentine's. Once cut, the roses are plunged into a citric acid solution and kept cool to keep them hydrated. Then it's on to the grading table. Time to inspect all the roses they worked so hard to produce. Everyone loves long-stem roses, and it's here they decide whether they've made the grade. Each rose is hand-sorted according to its size into 5 categories. The most prized roses are those with the long, straight stems. And finally, they're loaded onto refrigerated trucks destined for loved ones around the country. And for Ty Dickinson, that's what it's all about.
Having flowers at home is just beautiful. It's like bringing in a breath of sunshine. Flowers are a special, special product, and the rose is the best of all flowers.
With the onset of cooler weather, you're sitting back thinking, finally, my garden work is done. Wrong. Now's the time to get out and really pay attention to your garden, especially if you have rose bushes, because you don't want Old Man Winter to come and take a hit on these, because they won't be here next spring if he does. A couple of things you should have been doing by now. Cut off the fertilizer. You don't want a deadhead. You don't want to prune. All these would encourage new growth. That's not what we want for winter. What we want to do is get the plant to go in a dormancy period. We want to continue watering the plant up until the ground freezes solid. Now, when it comes time for protection, there are many different methods to use, but one that's very simple is using the cone method. Just go to your garden center and buy one of these. It's nothing more than a styrofoam cone, costs about $4. We're going to place this over the top of this plant. You can see this one's a small one because we planted it this year, so it fits very nicely. Take the top off, and on the inside, we're going to fill it with a shredded mulch or a bark or even some leaves. Or you can use peat moss or potting soil, which are especially effective in keeping temperatures steady. Also, to prevent overheating, keep the top off except for during the coldest days of the year. Now you can see it works wonderfully for this, but for this one, it's a bigger bush, so we're going to take twine. We're going to gently wrap this around the plant, pulling in the canes so that it will fit the cone. And then same thing, put this on top, fill it up, insulate it. Your roses will be nice and toasty during the winter season so that next spring, when you take the cones off, we've got beautiful blooms once again. When it comes to pruners, there's a lot of different tools to get the job done. You just have to know which pruner works best for which job. So I'm going to try to help you out here. First of all, for the small jobs, things like perennials, some small shrubs, really all you need are hand pruners. I prefer the bypass pruners. That's when the blade on top crosses over the bottom. This prevents any kind of crushing, plus it makes it easier to have this blade sharpened. Now for the larger shrubs, those that need to be pruned, trimmed, or even manicured, you'll want to invest in these. These are called hedge shears, and you can see they'll get the job done. But what about those small branches on trees? Well then, you'll need to invest in a pair of these. These are called loppers. These work great for small branches and will cut branches about 1.5 inches in diameter. Now for the branches that are larger than 1.5 inches, for a small investment and a little bit of elbow grease, you can invest in one of these. It's simply a handsaw. It works wonders on those big branches, plus it folds up nicely so you can take it on a camping trip. Now what about those branches that you can't reach? Well, not to worry, because there's a tool for you. It's called a tree pruner. And you can see here it extends up to about 15 feet. It has a nice saw, and right here has a lopper on it as well. And for heaven's sakes, if there's any branch you can't reach, call in the experts. If you love the smell of fresh roses, then this recipe for potpourri is just for you. All you need to do in a large bowl is combine 4 cups of dried rose petals, some rose buds, 1/2 cup of chamomile, 1/4 cup of lavender. Then we'll need a piece of vanilla bean, about 1.5 inches long, and then about 1/2 teaspoon of whole cloves. It's about 10 cloves. Now, the secret behind great smelling potpourri comes from the spices and the essential oils you use. And in order for that fragrance to last a long time, they must be added to what's called a fixative. Here I'm going to use orris root. This is a powder that you can pick up at your co-op or any craft store. So I've taken 1/8 of a cup, added 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 5 drops of Rose Absolute essential oil, 2 drops of geranium oil, 2 drops of lavender. I'm going to mix this all together and then pour it in the potpourri. Once it's well mixed, place your potpourri into an airtight container and store it in a cool, dark location for at least 6 weeks. This will allow the potpourri to cure so that when you open it up later, it'll smell like a fresh flower from your garden. Tess McDonough is the executive chef here at Kendall Jackson, and today on the menu we have some corn salsa.
Yep, today we're going to be making a great corn salsa. All of these ingredients come from our organic gardens here at the Wine Center, and the base for the salad is fresh corn. We shuck that right off the ear. We don't have to saute that or anything because the corn is so fresh and there's enough sweetness to it. And today we're going to use some lemon juice and some lime juice, which come right off the trees from the garden as well.
Oh, how nice. Now, based on what I learned earlier, we've got a lot of light vegetables, so my guess is we're making this work with the Chardonnay.
Absolutely, you did your homework. This works exactly with Chardonnay, but we're allowed to cheat a little bit and add some red pepper, some of the herbaceous tones like the parsley, chives, and cilantro.
So what's the first thing we need to do?
First thing we're going to do is add the corn. I like to add the corn first. Next, I want to add my roasted red peppers, and I like to add roasted red peppers as well as raw peppers. We kind of want to build on the textures in the salad as well as the flavors, and the roasted peppers will add more sugar to them, and then the raw peppers will have more of a fresher, crispier flavor to them, so I like to add both.
Okay. And then next we have the yellow peppers. Again, we've got roasted, fresh, 1/4 cup of each.
Exactly.
Okay, so let me just dump some of those in. Excellent. Now what's next?
I think for this amount of salad, about half of the red onion would work great for this.
So how much are we using here?
This is about 1/8 of a cup.
Okay.
If you add too much, it's going to bring out a bitter quality in the Chardonnay. So I want enough where it's going to complement the salad but not overpower the wine.
Got it.
Now we want to add some of the fresh herbs, and these are sort of the finishing touches. I'm going to add about 1 tablespoon of the chives, and I like adding this because this is going to add another nice quality. We had some of the red onion, but now we've got some of the chives as well. So once again, we're building on the flavors here.
Okay.
This is the cilantro. Once again, another really great, fresh, green flavor, a little bit more of that nice, fresh taste to it. It's going to liven this up. And then we've got fresh parsley. You can't have a salsa without fresh parsley, in my opinion. It's just really terrific. It's going to add a great flavor to this. Rebecca, why don't you pour about half of the lemon and the lime juice in the salsa, and I'll go ahead and stir that. We want to add an acid to this. There's a lot of sweetness in it. So now the last thing we want to do is add a little bit of salt and pepper. This is going to season the salad and tighten it up, give it the finishing touches. Cracked pepper, can't beat that. Now, why don't you give it a taste, see what you think?
First of all, look how beautiful this is. It's got to taste great. So what would this be good on?
Well, this is great alone, but if we do need to serve it with something, it's great with grilled fish, grilled chicken. I like it with a lighter fish if we're going to serve it with the Chardonnay, like a grouper or a sea bass or a flounder for you folks from the East Coast. But also grilled chicken works well with this.
It is absolutely delightful.
Great.
It is so good. Thank you so much for joining us today. And remember, this is a great salsa that works well with your Chardonnay. Now, if you would like Tessa's corn salsa recipe, be sure to check out my website at www.rebeccasgarden.com.
Whew, that was a lot of information. Hope you got all that down, and I want to see those hands. Well, like I said, if you've enjoyed this DVD, be sure to look for the others. I'm Rebecca Coles. Until next time, keep those little hands dirty.